ANZ shows why higher interest rates are good for banks, but there's a sting in the outlook for the lenders. Forecasts of a big hike in interest rates next week. And the International Energy Agency declares the globe has hit peak fossil fuels. It's Friday, the 28th of October, 2022. Welcome to Fear and Greed, Australia's most popular business podcast. I'm Michael Thompson, and good morning, Sean Aylmer.
Good morning, Michael. Have you been on your WeAre8 app today? Or not yet, yesterday?
No, not. I'll tell you why. The last 24 hours were entirely spent kind of planning. To be honest, I wasn't even going to be here this morning. I was so set on winning the $160 million Powerball last night that I pretty much had that whole thing spent. And so I'm a little disappointed to be here. I'm going to be honest.
I'm a little disappointed that if you won all that money, you wouldn't have come to work at Fear and Greed. Like, what do we mean to you? Clearly not enough.
Clearly not $160 million, it would seem.
That's right.
And Sean, look, I do just need to very quickly mention our listener survey. This is something we've actually talked about a couple of times now, and it's basically your chance to tell us what you want to hear. We are conducting a listener survey. It is all anonymous. It is very short as well. It's only a couple of minutes. There is a link to it in today's show notes. You can also find it on our various social media platforms, but go to the show notes. It's probably easiest. And really, we want to make sure that the information that we're giving you is kind of tailored to what you want to hear. So if you want to hear more about crypto, tell us. If you want to hear about gold or other commodities, tell us that. If you want to hear more about investing, tell us that. If you want to hear more entrepreneur stories, anything along those lines, just tell us. This is the survey is the perfect opportunity to do that. So you'll find that link in the show notes. If you do that today, it will be greatly appreciated. Sean, you're not allowed to do it.
Right.
I mean, I already know what you want to hear, and that is more of Sean Aylmer.
On anything.
On anything. It doesn't even have to be something you know about. You just want to hear more of Sean.
Often it's not.
Now, if I see an anonymous survey response coming through saying more Sean Aylmer, please, you know that's probably going to get discounted now, because I will assume that it was you and I've implanted this idea in your head.
Yeah, Mum said she'd fill one in though. You can't discount Mum.
I think everyone's getting their mothers to do it just to skew the results. Anyway, we need to also mention that you've got a chat coming up after the show today with James Shale, who is Dyson's service manager in Australia and New Zealand. Basically, he's one of the engineers.
That's right. His title undersells James because he is one of the senior engineers, and Dyson's a great supporter of ours, and we thought we'd actually talk to someone who's in the engine room of what's going on in that organisation. It's just a fascinating chat because they really push the boundaries when it comes to, products, household products really. And we talk to him all about what it's like to work within Dyson. Great chat.
Yeah, it's coming up a little bit later on. But first, Sean, ANZ Bank yesterday demonstrated really the benefits of higher interest rates to lenders, unveiling a 5% jump in profit.
That's right. The Melbourne-based bank announced a $6.55 billion full-year profit, and the jump reflected an increase in the bank's net interest margins, essentially the difference between what ANZ pays on deposits and receives on loans. However, Chief Executive Officer Shane Elliott warned the geopolitical uncertainty and rising rates has clouded the outlook. The bank's share price fell about 3.3% yesterday after that commentary. Now, the bank, which is the fourth largest behind the Commonwealth Bank, National Australia Bank and Westpac, had strong results across all its businesses. That's retail, New Zealand, commercial banking and institutional. ANZ really has struggled to match its peers, particularly in home lending, which is a very profitable part of banking. But in the 6 months, it seems to have caught up. The net interest margin at the end of the period, when rates were rising, was much higher than earlier in the year, and that augurs well for bank shareholders.
So then rate rises are good for bank share prices?
In theory, they are, though it hadn't been the case up until a month ago. Fears of a global slowdown had overwhelmed the good news on rates for lenders. But in the past month or so, Commonwealth Bank and National Australia Bank's share prices are up 10%. Westpac's up about 13%. ANZ, even after yesterday's fall, is more than 7% higher. The other promising part of yesterday's full-year ANZ results was that its loan book is showing few signs of stress so far. In fact, it is that confident that ANZ took $232 million from the account it uses for tough times and put it back into the main account. Mr. Elliott believes ANZ, and more generally the banking sector, is in pretty good shape if a recession or even a downturn does eventuate.
All right. So banks aside, what else happened on local markets yesterday?
Well, the local share market hit its highest point in 6 weeks, ending the day up 0.5% to 6,845 points. Energy and material stocks led the way, while telcos were the worst. Financials weren't real good either on the back of that ANZ result. Woodside and Santos were all standouts, while Telstra ended down more than 1%. In corporate news yesterday, Michael, plumbing suppliers group Reece said revenue rose nearly 30% in the September quarter, led by a big jump in sales in the US. Its share price rose about 2%.
International markets, what's happening?
Best news of the whole day. The Aussie dollar's back above 65 US cents. A week out from travelling. Go, you good thing.
Is that the best news for everyone, or is it the best news for Sean Aylmer?
It's the best news for Sean Aylmer and his travelling companions. Jackie's delighted. The kids are delighted. Absolutely. No,
I just love the way that your personal interest has fully taken over this podcast now.
Well.
You were going to come back from your holidays, and we're just going to get the most kind of objective news nonstop until you can find another cause to kind of push.
Well, yeah, that's yes, that's right.
No objections. Please carry on.
Look, the dollar's up on the back of firming views that the Reserve Bank will have to lift interest rates by more than thought. A bit more on that in a moment. Both oil and gold prices are slightly higher.
Okay, we'll be back in a moment with the rest of the day's business news. Sean, Westpac has tipped a 50 basis point interest rate hike on Tuesday, Melbourne Cup Day, when the Reserve Bank board meets.
The bank's chief economist, Bill Evans, who's been following the Reserve Bank for several decades and isn't one to jump at shadows, thinks the inflation figures this week were such a surprise that the central bank will have to lift rates more than they originally thought. Official inflation figures on Wednesday, of course, showed that headline inflation hit a 32-year high during the September quarter, and underlying inflation was higher than expected. Dr. Evans now thinks the cash rate will get to 3.85%. That's more than 1% higher than it is today. Think what that'll do to your home loan repayments. ANZ economists actually agree with Dr. Evans from Westpac, though National Australia Bank and Commonwealth Bank economists are just a little bit more optimistic.
All right. Sean, employer groups aren't happy with the federal government's proposed industrial relations bill tabled in Parliament yesterday, saying it is a seismic shift to workplace relations and risks jobs and the economic outlook.
Big story. Under the proposed legislation, unions would have the right to strike across employers for higher pay, according to the Financial Review. It also includes reforms such as simplifying enterprise bargaining, creating enforceable rights to flexible work, limiting fixed-term contracts, banning pay secrecy, mandating arbitration for intractable enterprise bargaining disputes, and abolishing the union watchdog in the Australian Building and Construction Commission. Now, Workplace Relations Minister Tony Burke said the bill lowered barriers to bargain, given less than 15% of employees are actually covered by an interim agreement, but senior leaders weren't happy. Qantas boss Alan Joyce and Commonwealth Bank's Matt Comyn both warned that, for example, it could stop getting people back into the office. There's so much to play out in this, and the legislation was the bill was only introduced yesterday. It's a long way to go, but certainly the business community is not happy.
It's a big story. And of course, Sean, we have our weekend edition, which comes out tomorrow, where we pick out the biggest story of the week and the sleeper story and the most remarkable story and the like. Do you think that this story would fit into one of those categories?
I'd say so.
I'm just trying to find a few little hints and things, a few ideas. I'm determined to win tomorrow. Now, Sean, we haven't really been covering the trial of Bruce Lerman for his alleged rape of Brittany Higgins in Parliament House back in 2019, but there was quite an incredible development yesterday with the jury being dismissed.
ACT Supreme Court Justice Lucy McCallum revealed one of the 12 jury members had done their own research, going expressly against her directions, and brought outside material into the deliberation room. A juror brought a research paper about false sexual assault claims into the room, and during a routine clean of it, a sheriff's officer bumped a juror's document folder onto the floor. When they picked it up, they noticed the research. Mr. Lerman faces a retrial in February next year.
Sean, a fifth COVID jab could be on the way, with Health Minister Mark Butler saying the government is pretty close to making a decision.
Yeah, that's right. He said the government is awaiting advice from the Australian Technical Advisory Group on immunisation. That is a mouthful. With the initial focus on older Australians and those with immune conditions. He doesn't expect a decision until early next year, but Michael, that's only a couple of months away. He also took the opportunity yesterday to urge the millions of people who haven't had a third jab yet to have one.
Yeah, go and get one. All right. Retailer JB Hi-Fi, Sean, has promised to get more women into management roles and get to 30% female representation on the board by the middle of next year.
JB said sales last quarter had continued to grow strongly, with revenue up 15%. Chief Executive Terry Smart said the company will be helped by product innovation going forward because customers want the latest gadgets. But he conceded that things will get tougher into 2023 as people feel the real effect of interest rate rises.
And Super Retail Group also said the 3 months to September were strong.
Yeah, same store sales were up 20%. The best results came from outdoor wear brand MacPac, where revenue jumped 76% on the previous year. That previous year had been affected by COVID, of course. Supercheap Auto and Rebel also performed well, while BCF sales were only up slightly. CEO Anthony Herity said the current 6-month result is highly dependent on trading in the peak Christmas holiday period, and he does expect higher interest rates to start to bite. So that's two big retailers saying the same thing yesterday about interest rates.
Wholesale energy prices for the September quarter back up the government's assertion in this week's budget that costs are set to escalate next year.
Wholesale prices are supposed to fall in the July to September period, particularly that latter part, because demand is highest in the middle of winter and the height of summer. But it didn't really happen. In fact, prices were a record high for the September quarter, triple what they were a year earlier. Average prices on the national electricity market dipped from the crisis-hit June quarter record of $264 a megawatt hour, averaging $216 a megawatt hour in July through to September. Now, that's according to the Australian Energy Market Operator. A year earlier, it was just $58 a megawatt hour.
Sean, the corporate watchdog has fined Talau Energy $53,280 over greenwashing, which is the first penalty from a major Australian regulator for this type of misconduct.
Yeah, look, greenwashing is when companies overpromise their green credentials or make false claims about their commitment to the environment. In this case, Talau was fined over allegedly misleading statements made to the stock exchange late last year that the electricity it produced at its Lesedi power station was carbon neutral. The Australian Securities and Investments Commission said it had reasonable grounds to believe these claims were false or misleading because Talau had not undertaken any substantive modelling of the likely carbon dioxide emissions that would be generated at Lesedi, which is located in Botswana. What's really interesting about this is that the regulator has slapped a fine on someone for greenwashing for the first time.
Sean, Australian Clinical Labs says health record and credit card information of more than 200,000 patients and staff was stolen in a cyber hack back in February.
ACL said the information came from its MedLab pathology business and then it was posted on the dark web. It affected customers mostly in New South Wales and Queensland, and the company said to date there's no evidence of misuse of any of the information or any demand from the cyber criminals. ACL is the number 3 player in the pathology market in Australia with a market capitalisation of more than $700 million. Its share price fell 5% yesterday.
All right, moving on to overseas news now, and the International Energy Agency has for the first time forecast that use of fossil fuels is expected to plateau or peak, marking a pretty historical moment for society, really.
Yeah, I think this is quite exciting. The agency said even if no new policies are introduced, the world will soon be using less fossil fuel energy. Coal use is expected to decline in coming years. Natural gas will plateau by the end of this decade, and oil use is expected to level off in the mid-2030s. A big part of the reason for peak fossil fuel is the huge spending, particularly in Europe, to develop renewable energy sources and shift away from Russian oil and gas. Whatever the reason, a pretty significant moment in history.
Yeah, sure is. Now, Instagram, which is owned by Meta, now has 2 billion monthly active users worldwide, and it's closing in on Facebook, which has just under 3 billion, but even that scale wasn't enough to save Meta from one of the biggest share market sell-offs ever.
Yes, shares in Meta tumbled 19% in after-hours trading yesterday, wiping off $65 billion of value. The share price has fallen more than 60% this year. Meta reported another quarter of falling revenues, and there's still plenty of skepticism about the company's big bets on the metaverse and artificial intelligence. Mind you, Michael, the number of users is impressive. 3 billion on Facebook, 2 billion on Instagram, and another 2 billion using WhatsApp. Total monthly users for its family of apps is now 3.71 billion worldwide. Amazing reach.
Now, Sean, it's been, I reckon, more than a week since we last mentioned Elon Musk.
I've been missing him.
I have too. Well, fortunately, we've got a Musk mention today. He has visited the headquarters of Twitter, and while he's there, he told staff that he doesn't really plan to cut 75% of employees when he takes over.
So Mr. Musk, whose $44 billion deal for Twitter is on track to close possibly tonight, Australian time, denied the previously reported number in an address to employees at the company's San Francisco office. According to Bloomberg, the billionaire is still expected to cut staff as part of the takeover, causing anxiety among workers. Earlier yesterday, Mr. Musk posted a video clip of himself walking into the offices carrying a kitchen sink. He changed his Twitter profile description to read Chief Twit.
All right. Up next, Sean, is the Fear and Greed Daily interview, and today you're speaking with James Shale from Dyson.
Pardon the pun, the inside workings at Dyson. James is one of the chief engineers there. Fascinating chat.
Up next in the Fear and Greed playlist on your podcast platform or at fearandgreed.com.au. Thank you, Sean.
Thank you, Michael.
It's Friday, the 28th of October, 2022. Make sure you're following the podcast and join us online on LinkedIn, Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. I'm Michael Thompson, and that was Fear and Greed. Have a great day.